You're listening to Conservation Connection.
Presented by Last Chance Endeavors.
I'm Chance.
I'm Sarah Catherine.
We're a husband and wife team running a wildlife education nonprofit focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week, here on Conservation Connection, we do just that by introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day across the globe.
We talk to professionals working to protect our planet and ask them about their career,
their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
This episode is a collaboration with the Sun Valley Forum in Sun Valley, Idaho, and was made possible through a generous donation by the Nancy P. and Richard K. Robbins Family Foundation.
The Sun Valley Forum is an intergenerational meeting of forward-thinking professionals that come from a diverse range of disciplines.
These experts are on the cutting edge of what's happening in the fight for our future, and they've all come together at the Sun Valley Forum to share ideas and collaborate on solutions for a greener tomorrow.
Let's get to the show.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to another episode of Conservation Connection. We are here in Sun Valley, Idaho at the Sun Valley Forum. We are incredibly excited to be sitting down with Mattie Mead. He is the founder and CEO of Hempitecture.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm incredibly excited to be here myself, so thanks for welcoming me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going to keep that energy going.
So I have so many questions for you. I guess let's start with, what is Hempitecture? What is your company?
Sure. So Hempitecture is a sustainable materials company that is focused on using natural plant-based fiber, primarily industrial hemp fiber, to create the products of tomorrow, today. So the products that we're creating today are thermal insulation, primarily for residential and commercial applications, but there are a lot of other industries that we can serve with our non-woven manufacturing technology that we're actually setting up right this moment here in Idaho. So some of the other industries that we intend to get involved in are cold freight shipping. So think about all the food that's shipped across the United States. If you've ever ordered a Blue Apron or Hello Fresh, all that food has to get to you kept cold. So we are seeking to incorporate our plant-based fiber, non-woven insulation into things like packages. So we're starting out with building materials, but a lot of other industries in which we can serve.
So what makes hemp in particular well-suited to use in industrial fiber applications?
Yeah, to answer that question, I'll almost kind of just rewind and go back as to the history of hemp in the United States and the somewhat mired perception of industrial hemp, because I'm no stranger to this after years of promoting and speaking about industrial hemp, that many folks do think that it is cannabis. And in a sense, they are correct. Industrial hemp is a member of the cannabis sativa family, but industrial hemp generally is non-intoxicating. It is grown for its biomass, which produces things like fiber, produces an inner wooden core that is a lignocellulosic material that is like wood chips, and it also produces seeds. So long before we invented any petrochemical techniques to create things like nylon rope, we used bast fiber crops. Bast fiber crops are things like industrial hemp, flax, kenaf, jute. So of that whole family, industrial hemp actually has one of the strongest natural fibers available. And so the explorers that sailed across the ocean, they had sails made with hemp fiber. In World War I and early on, we were using rope that was hemp-based rope. It wasn't until around 1937 that the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, and that Marijuana Tax Act actually had very little to do with intoxicating cannabinoids, THC, which I'll say is sort of a distant cousin of what we use for our materials. And that legislation made all species of cannabis sativa illegal. So, with that being said, the United States was the only industrialized nation on the planet to have made industrial hemp illegal. That led way for the petrochemical companies to really create things like nylon rope and utilize petrochemical-based alternatives for things that plants were doing naturally. It is not until even today, but really began in 2018, that we're beginning to untangle and clarify this uniquely American conception of industrial hemp. It's interesting. Go to Canada, they don't have the same jokes that we do. Go to the Netherlands, they've been using industrial hemp for hundreds, thousands of years. So we're just untangling that today due to some legislation that was passed in 2018 that allowed the cultivation of industrial hemp. So we're kind of relearning the potential of industrial hemp. And coming back full circle to your question, why industrial hemp? It goes back to the same reason that explorers use hemp in sails. It goes back to the same reason that the first American flag was made with hemp fiber. It is an incredible natural fiber. So when we use industrial hemp fiber in our products, primarily our insulation products, we are ending up with a product that is long-lasting, durable, but perhaps in today's day and age, most importantly, is carbon negative. Industrial hemp, being a rapidly renewable resource, offsets 9.8 tons of carbon dioxide for every acre that is grown on.
Wow.
So that means that when we use that fiber, when we take that fiber from the field, we process it, we are making a product that has a carbon negative attribute that lends to ultimately even a carbon negative or carbon neutral product that goes to the customer. So that's a really long way of saying why industrial hemp.
When you set the carbon implications of industrial hemp fibers against the other fossil fuel based, petrochemical based fibers available on the market, which have a huge carbon impact because of the extraction, shipping, and release process that happens around that. I mean, it's like night and day. It's literally a reflection, right? It's all of these oil based fibers are really, really carbon intensive, whereas
Absolutely.
hemp is actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and locking it down into these fibers in a way that nothing else is.
Absolutely. And I'm now, at this point in my life, a little bit of a fiber nerd. I love fiber. We don't realize how prolific fiber is within our lives. Right now, we are sitting on chairs that have padding in them. Those chairs have a polyester, probably padding. Your car that you maybe drove today, the lining of that car has a non-woven fibrous mat. All of our walls, ceilings, and floors have insulation in them, which generally are all made from fiber. We are all wearing clothing that is made with fiber. Much of it is plastic fiber. So I think sort of the revisitation, going back to the solutions that nature offers and optimizing those solutions as an alternative to the petrochemical-based fibers really is an opportunity that we're now being afforded here in the United States.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I was looking at recently is, there's this big discussion around microplastics and where are microplastics coming from? Basically, this idea that plastics made from petrochemicals don't really disappear. They just break down into smaller and smaller pieces. And now we're finding them like inside the living tissues of trees. We're finding them inside human bodies. And that's, we don't understand the full implications of that, but obviously it's not going to be great. And one of the biggest contributors to the microplastic issues is plastic fibers that you find in clothing, in chairs and everything, and they're shedding these little tiny bits of plastic. And that is not an issue that we find with natural fibers. Those natural fibers, by definition, break down over time in a way that does not have 100 to 1,000 year impact.
Well, and in fact, you're actually speaking to some of the benefits of some of the products in which we offer. Biodegradation, composting, it is a generally complex subject, and I by no means am an expert in it. However, if our insulation ended up in a landfill at the end of its life, it is very likely that a large portion of it would biodegrade, or if even it got into an ocean system, it would biodegrade. It's not going going to just break down and live there forever. So that is a characteristic that we're proud of. And I do think that there are times and places for plastic.
100%.
And we shouldn't, I don't think, demonize plastic 100% all the time, but we're really now starting to see exciting developments in more plant-based plastics, bio-based plastics. And where plastic is necessary, that's where I get really excited about the kind of fibers that are made from, say, polylactic acid, PLA, which is a sort of a plant-based plastic alternative. So there's a time and place for everything, but our focus today is helping companies really reduce the amount of plastic that they're putting in their products. And with our technology, our non-woven technology that we're actually setting up right now in Idaho, we want to encourage companies, hey, you're making a product right now that has a formulation. Let's see what happens if we put 5% plant fiber in that. And when you put 5% plant fiber in that, you can account for the amount of carbon dioxide that is being offset by that, and you're lowering your plastic content. So I think that there's small incremental steps that we can take that will have huge actions. I also do think huge action is very necessary, but I think they have to happen in tandem.
Yeah. Going back to something you said earlier, I'm really glad you mentioned some of the history of like hemp and cannabis, and especially in the US, because when, I guess it must have been in 2018, kind of when the laws began to change on hemp, and I would see like clothes and it would be like made from hemp, I would turn to Chance and I was like, isn't hemp like bad? Like, why, what's the difference? Why is it here now? Why haven't we seen it? Like, don't people say this is bad? And so you giving some context on the history of that and like, yeah, it's kind of the same, but it's completely different, was really helpful for me and probably some of our listeners as well.
I think we're going to see a bit of a resurgence for industrial hemp here in the United States, especially on the heels of the federal farm bill that was passed in 2018. That was kind of the watershed moment for industrial hemp returning to the United States. Since then, one company, Patagonia, has been doing a lot of great PR work to kind of demystify industrial hemp and clarify what hemp is and what it isn't. And now I'm an Idaho resident, and I actually thought that there may become 51 or 52 states before Idaho legalized industrial hemp because we're a little bit behind the curve on some things. But actually, being the last state to legalize industrial hemp here in Idaho has led to some really positive legislation that I think will really allow farmers another tool in their tool belt to capitalize on a potential crop. With our business being based here in Idaho, we're actually buying all of our fiber from surrounding states, primarily Montana, in fact. But part of our medium to long-term vision is to bring industrial hemp as a rotational cropping system to Idaho, where we're already growing very carbon-intensive crops. So if you've ever had a French fry, a good chance is that it is from Idaho. Potatoes are, one of our most famous crops here. Another famous crop that we have that's a little less known is sugar beets. Both potatoes and sugar beets are very energy intensive. They require a lot of fertilizer. They require a lot of water. And year after year, if you keep growing the same thing on the same ground, it really extracts the nutrients. And so where I see industrial hemp as a potential opportunity in Idaho is as a rotational crop. If we can make the economic argument, hey, if you plant on that field that you've been planting potatoes for the last 4 seasons, industrial hemp for 1 season, and a company like Hempitecture buys that industrial hemp from you at the end of the season, and that following season, you're actually getting more yield from your potato crop, you've made the economic case. You have to make an economic case for sustainability, or else it's not going to hold water. And so that's kind of the sort of medium to long-term program that we're working on, because one thing that we've learned is make sure that we're taking measured approaches. And when you're working with farmers, the last thing you want to do is lose the trust or confidence of a farmer, because you will not get that back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important. Obviously, your company does lots of work on like a material science scale, right? And producing fibers that are very useful in certain ways. But I love that a lot of this conversation has been so much bigger than that, right? You're talking about how can what we do help the environment and improve the livelihoods of our local farmers, right? It's a community movement. It's not simply like we're making this product to sell.
It's about supply chain. It's about systems. Hempitecture cannot exist without a supply chain for hemp fiber. Hempitecture cannot exist without the farmers that are putting those seeds in the ground. And so we're all kind of a gear in a motor working together. And when you pull one of the gears out, then the motor stops working. The motor for a long time has been very disheveled, and pieces have been spread all the way out and laid to rest because of our legislation. Now we have the opportunity to rebuild that motor, get it fine-tuned, and actually create a market with hopefully products that are coming out of it that are highly sustainable, increased equity for communities that are losing opportunity because of agricultural monocropping. I mean, there's so many things that what we're doing touches, and we don't claim to solve it all, but we view it as a kind of tool in the toolkit to help begin to address some of these very critical issues.
Is there a most surprising fact or use of hemp that you think most people may not know?
One use of industrial hemp that is totally unrelated to our business, but I find remarkably fascinating, is the use of the wooden core of industrial hemp, which just visualize a wood chip. This wood chip can be micronized, so that means that it is reduced in size, made to be more small. There is a company that is traveling around to orphaned oil wells. This company is called the Well Done Foundation, and they have developed a cement slurry that they infuse with sort of a milled down hemp hurd to make the cement actually carbon neutral, and they inject it into orphaned oil wells. An orphaned oil well means Company X was, in Nebraska drilling oil, and they went bankrupt, or the well wasn't productive, and they just decided to move on. And there was no ramification for that. Well, as soon as you declare bankruptcy, you don't have to clean up your oil well site. And I just find it such an incredible use of industrial hemp to not just plug these oil wells that are causing methane emissions, all sorts of bad things for the atmosphere are coming out of these orphaned oil wells. But they are doing it in a way that is carbon neutral, because cement has a high embodied energy, high embodied carbon. And by putting that industrial hemp in there, they're netting out the carbon footprint of that cement. And then there's also practical applications of the micronized hurd. It's not just for the environmental benefit of it being, hey, we're lowering the Portland cement carbon footprint. It actually goes and fills in the fissures and the cracks and the walls of the well. So I find that an incredibly fascinating use of industrial hemp, and that's being done by the Well Done Foundation.
So if I understand that right, they're basically saying it produces a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to create concrete. And you can put enough hemp, which removes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, into the concrete so that it is a net neutral solution, right? So that there's the amount of carbon dioxide it took to create the concrete is offset by the amount of carbon dioxide pulled out of the atmosphere from the hemp.
That is exactly correct.
That's pretty fantastic. So we've talked a lot about industrial hemp in general. I'd like to kind of zoom in a little bit more on Hempitecture specifically, and kind of like what the history of starting that looked like and what you guys are doing today.
Sure. So I think building a business is an iterative process. And if you had asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing today or what my business might look like today, I think it would be a very different answer. I did start Hempitecture when I was an undergraduate student studying architecture and environmental sciences. So it's kind of at the nexus of these two different disciplines. One is designing things for the built environment, and the other is understanding the impact that humans have on the built environment. I learned about a problem, and the problem is that buildings and their operations today in the United States are responsible for about 40% of our energy consumption and 40% of our carbon footprint. So when you see a problem, the entrepreneurial light bulb goes off. What is the solution to that problem? And so I did a senior year thesis study that I called The Contemporary Relevance of Earth Architecture. And I looked at how human beings over the course of time built structure in various climatic regions. So in one region, maybe they're using wattle and daub. In another region, they're using straw. In another region, they're using stone and mud. And I was amazed at the results of what was primarily coming out of France, Belgium, the Netherlands, of using industrial hemp fiber, industrial hemp core, or the hurd, with limestone as a building material. And I had this sort of light bulb moment of, wow, okay, I'm actually going to redo my senior year thesis and make it all about hemp building materials because this is the coolest thing I've ever freaking heard of. And my professor at the time was like, dude, maybe slow down on that. Why don't you channel your excitement in a different way? And that was where the concept of Hempitecture as a startup formed. And it was on this building material, hemp and lime. Today, we still do a little bit with hemp and lime. When I say hemp, I mean hemp hurd. But what I'm referring to is a building system. It is an approach. It's a method. Just like no one frames out a house and puts their windows in and says, I think I'm going to put some straw bales in my wall. Like you start out saying, I'm going to build a straw bale house. You have to start out saying, I'm going to build a hemp lime or hempcrete home. So Hempitecture kind of got its start focused on that building material, but we realized there's some challenges with this material. Goes back to it being a system, an approach. And we began to think more about products. How can Hempitecture create products that are easy to use, can replace other conventional products, and be used in systems or methods of building that are ubiquitous? So that was sort of this pivot moment that happened about 2.5, if not 3 years ago, where Hempitecture pivoted from hempcrete to today our flagship product, hemp wool. Hemp wool is a thermal insulation bat that goes in between your studs, your floor joists, your rafters, basically anywhere that you're trying to keep air conditioned or warm, hemp wool can go. That is where we're focused today. We can look to other markets in the world and see the success of plant-based insulation. There are growing market segments, particularly in the EU, for plant-based insulation. And I think we're soon to see that tailwind transfer over here to the United States. So for the purpose of this discussion, Hempitecture is very much so focused on hemp wool insulation, and then the other applications in which hemp wool can be applied. Other things, like I said before in this conversation, other things need to be insulated beyond just our homes. Cars have insulation. Boxes that are holding perishable food have insulation. Believe it or not, even washing machines have insulations, acoustic insulation primarily. So there's so many different industries that we can touch and play in. But at the end of the day, our goal is to bring plant-based fiber into different industries that really need the sustainability benefits. And building, I believe, is one of the most important segments.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting, another kind of addition to like why this is environmentally sound is insulation is so critically important in terms of energy conservation, right? If you can seal a house well enough that the cold air stays inside or outside, as however you want it to be, wherever you are. Like in Georgia, it's 90 degrees right now. So
Yeah.
our heating cooling is very different from what it is at
Yes.
45 in Idaho in
Yes.
June, which is insane. But if you can seal a house or a structure well enough, you can heat it one time a day, as opposed to having the heat kick on over and over and over throughout the day. That's a huge amount of fuel. And temperature itself, heating things up or cool things down, is like one of the single biggest energy consumers that we have today.
Well, we are hardy folks here in Idaho, so we embrace the 45-degree temperatures.
It's the potatoes, isn't it?
In June, it's the potatoes. That's exactly what
It's
it is.
like a warm 45.
Yeah, it's a dry 45. No, but you're exactly right. Regardless of whether or not you're used to those cold temperatures and different times of years, the activation energy for turning heat on, turning it off, there's always more energy expelled in that process. And so, yes, having homes well insulated is absolutely critical for carbon footprints and energy consumption. And so actually the benefit of our product is really twofold. Not only are we offering a product that is carbon negative, but we are offering a product that helps you save energy in your home. So you're using a carbon negative product to save operational energy and therefore operational carbon. In some of my more, I'd say, technical talks, or I'm speaking to an audience of architects or engineers, I talk often about the need to reconcile two very distinct things. And these two very distinct things are operational carbon and embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is all of the energy that's required to get your house together, built, and livable. Operational carbon is all of the energy that is taken to heat, cool, light, cook in your home. And what we're doing at Hempitecture is offering the ability to bring both of those together, carbon negative materials for a home or building rather, that requires little energy to operate.
What do you see as the future of Hempitecture? I know we've talked about it a little, but I think people tend to be creatures of habit, right? So do you think that plant-based insulation will ever be like the leading type of insulation used? And I guess with that, we also kind of have to talk about cost. I'm sure the cost to have this plant-based insulation somewhere right now is probably more than what we would expect it to be in the future as more is being produced and it's more accessible.
You are exactly correct. Right now, the cost is higher than conventional insulation. And that is something that perhaps over time, with economies of scale, we could see that be reduced and made more price competitive. We have talked about kind of price and the importance of economics driving sustainability. I do think that we need to get there. I think we need to get to price parity. Whether that's price parity with the cheapest insulation out there, is that possible? I don't know at this point in time. But we do realize that scaling what we are doing could lend to cost savings, and the potential of our product can only really be realized when it is at a competitive price. So in terms of the future of Hempitecture, it's interesting. We're having a lot of conversations right now internally as a team about what does that future look like. And you would think that we only do use hemp fiber. We use hemp fiber for a lot of our products, but we're actually open to other fibers. There are other natural resources out there that are waste streams that could be capitalized on. So I think the future of Hempitecture goes beyond just the potential of industrial hemp fiber, looks to other waste streams, whether it is waste streams of the cotton industry, waste streams of the timber industry. Here's a crazy one: waste streams of the banana industry. There are so many different industries that have waste that produce usable fiber. And I think that the future of Hempitecture could become a bit more diverse and broad in how we research and develop our products.
One day it might be plantitecture.
That's not off the table, and it's challenging because the name Hempitecture came from my undergraduate thesis study, and one of the questions that you really have to ask yourself is: does the name of a business serve you into the future? Does it serve you now? Will it serve you tomorrow? And will it serve you 10 years from now? We are I'd say very much so still a startup company, despite in various shades of gray, working on growing Hempitecture since 2013. But we are now raising capital. We have investors. We just completed a seed round. And this is a very important inflection point for Hempitecture as a business to really ask those difficult questions. And that is something that we are discussing right now.
Absolutely. So what can the average person do in the United States to further the utility of industrial hemp, just sort of like as a concept, or specifically to make choices to bring plant fiber into their lives?
So I think plant-based is a movement that is growing, and I don't think it's going away. 10 years ago, if you would have said Burger King would have a plant-based burger on their menu, you would have just been laughed at and said that is the most ridiculous thing ever. So I think plant-based is really kind of coming into many different elements of our world. So first and foremost, I'd encourage people to think plant-based, whether it's in their diet. If not 100% plant-based, think locally. Think to local sourcing. In terms of industrial hemp as a whole, there are so many different applications for industrial hemp that I could see incorporating industrial hemp into your diet by way of hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are an incredible source of protein and nutrition. Buy hemp clothing. And then, of course, buy Hempitecture hemp wool insulation for your next home.
Awesome. So if people wanted to find out more about your work, what you do, where could they go to find that?
Sure. So the best place to find more information about our business is just our website, hempitecture.com. It's like hemp architecture, hempitecture.com. And then if you want to learn more about me or my team, find us on LinkedIn. And we're always posting cool, fun, exciting things about what's going on at the company that you might not see on our website. And I appreciate everyone who's tuned into this episode and is listening and learning about the future of plant-based materials with us.
So if you guys want to find them online, you can scroll down to the show notes. I'm going to drop a link to Hempitecture right in the show notes so you don't have to figure out how to spell it. And you can go straight from listening to this episode to learning more. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
We'd love to hear from you. So if you want to reach out, go to our website, lastchanceendeavors.com/contact and shoot us an email.
We love questions from our listeners, so if you heard something that you want to know more about, be sure to let us know.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will help other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to the people working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week.